Hi, and welcome to Early Retirement Roadmap, the show where I help you prepare for and thrive in early retirement. If you're Gen X and your plan is to work until 65 because that feels like the safe, responsible thing to do, I'm going to challenge that. Not because retiring broke is smart, it's not. Please don't quit your job and tell people some guy on a podcast said it was fine. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. What I am saying is this: working longer is not risk-free. It feels safer because the paycheck keeps coming. But if you're in your 50s or early 60s, working another 5 or 10 years may cost you far more than you realize. It can cost you your healthiest years, energy, time with people you love, and the chance to actually enjoy the money you spent decades building. After retiring at 55 in December of 2024, I can see something much more clearly than I could while I was still working. The question isn't just, can I afford to retire? There's a second question that matters just as much. What is it costing me to keep working? Most people never ask that second one. A lot of people don't retire too early. A lot of people wait too long. Not because they're careless, but because they're scared, because they want certainty, because 65 has always felt like the normal finish line, and because nobody teaches you how to measure the cost of waiting. So in this episode, I'm walking through 6 hidden costs of working past 55, the risks that don't show up in the spreadsheet, and then 3 questions I'd ask before deciding to work one more year. So let's get into it. Hidden cost number 1 is assuming you get to choose your retirement date. People say I'll work until 65 or 67 or just 5 more years. That sounds like a great plan, but it assumes a lot: that your health holds up, your employer keeps you around, the economy cooperates, your family situation stays manageable, and your energy doesn't suddenly fall off a cliff. My life has not been one long parade of everything cooperating on schedule, and I'd guess yours hasn't either. For many Gen X workers, retirement happens before they feel completely ready. A layoff, a reorg, ageism, a health issue, yours or a spouse's, caregiving for a parent, burnout that finally becomes impossible to ignore. So the right question isn't, should I retire even if I can't afford it? Of course not. The better question is, what if I don't get to work as long as I think? That's a very different question, and it leads to much better planning. If your entire plan depends on working until 65 and life forces you out at 58, that can throw off your plan. But if you accept that your work timeline may be shorter than expected, you start making smarter decisions now. You reduce debt. You build a solid cash runway. You understand your healthcare options. You test what retirement spending actually looks like. You stop treating early retirement planning like something only for people who hate their jobs. You start seeing it as risk management. Even if you don't retire early by choice, you may need the option, and options are powerful. Hidden cost number 2 is letting one more year steal your healthiest years. This is the hidden cost I feel most acutely now that I'm retired. Before I left, I understood it logically. Of course time matters. Of course health matters. But once I actually retired, it hit differently. Time isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. Time has quality. A Tuesday morning when you're rested feels completely different from a Saturday morning when you're recovering from the week. A trip feels different when you're not checking work email in the hotel room. And here's what retirement calculators will never tell you. They can estimate whether your money may last. They cannot estimate whether your knees, your back, your energy, your curiosity, or your desire to travel will last. There are seasons of retirement, the active years when you can travel, explore, move your body, and actually use your freedom. Then the slower years when the menu of options gets smaller. Eventually, health starts to shape what's possible. Nobody knows when that shift will happen, but pretending it won't is not a plan. So when someone says, I'll just work 5 more years, I get it. I really do. 1 more year salary, retirement contributions, employer health insurance. That's not irrational. The problem is what happens next, because 1 more year rarely stays 1 more year. It becomes a moving finish line. You hit the number you thought you needed and decide you need more. You build the solid cash runway and decide it should be bigger. You run the projection, it looks good, and then you start tweaking the assumptions. Higher inflation, higher taxes, a market drop, a healthcare surprise. There will always be another what if. And if you're not careful, retirement planning becomes a very sophisticated way to avoid taking the leap into retirement when you really should, for all the reasons I'm talking about here. And that's the trap. You're not making a deliberate decision to keep working. You're just never quite making the decision to stop. At some point, you have to ask yourself an honest question. Do I have a real financial gap or a fear gap? A real financial gap means the numbers genuinely don't work yet. Spending isn't covered, not enough cushion, too much debt. That's not fear, that's information. And it's something you can act on. A fear gap is different. It's when the plan is solid, but you keep moving the goalposts because certainty feels just out of reach. And certainty will always just feel out of reach. You'll never know future tax rates, market returns, or healthcare costs with precision. You'll never know exactly how long you'll live, which brings it back to time. Every year you spend chasing perfect certainty is a year you're trading away. So the goal isn't perfect certainty. The goal is enough clarity to make a thoughtful decision and then actually make it. Hidden cost number 3, measuring against a number that isn't yours. Before you do the math on whether you can retire, make sure you're doing your math, not someone else's. Headlines love big round numbers, 1.52, 3 million, but those numbers are too generic to be useful. Your number depends on your spending, your taxes, your housing situation, your healthcare costs, your Social Security benefit, any pension you have, and how much flexibility you're willing to bring. The only way to find your real number is to actually build your retirement budget, and that means being honest about what changes and what doesn't. Some costs will go down in retirement. You won't be commuting, work clothes, lunches out, the convenience spending that piles up when you're busy and exhausted. A lot of that disappears. But some costs will go up, possibly significantly. If you've been telling yourself for 20 years that you'll travel when you retire, you're going to travel. Hobbies you never had time for when you were working cost money. More time at home means more spent on the things that make home enjoyable. And healthcare before Medicare is a real number that has to be in the plan. This is why I'm skeptical of anyone who says retirement will automatically be cheaper. It might be, but it might not be. It depends entirely on the life you're planning to live, which is exactly the point. The goal isn't to assume your spending goes down. The goal is to actually know what it's going to be. So do the work. Map out what you spend today. Go line by line and ask, does this go away in retirement? Does it stay or does it grow? Build a realistic picture of what your retired life actually costs, the one you want to live, not a stripped down version you'd resent. Because here's the thing. Once you have a real number, the question of whether you can retire becomes answerable. You're no longer measuring yourself against some generic headline figure. You're measuring against your life, and that's the only measurement that matters. Hidden cost number 4 is getting squeezed during the sandwich years. This one is very real for Gen X. A lot of people in their 50s or early 60s even aren't just thinking about retirement. They're helping adult kids, supporting aging parents, managing demanding jobs, and trying to hold their own health together all at the same time, and somehow still pretending to be excited about another software rollout at work. The cost here isn't just money, it's attention, energy, emotional bandwidth, and the constant feeling that someone needs something from you. Another 5 years of work during this season of life may not just mean 5 more years of income, it may mean 5 more years of your health, your marriage, your friendships, and your own life sitting on hold. I'm not saying walk out the door before you're financially ready, but I am saying be honest about what the job is actually costing you right now. Some people think retiring is selfish. I don't see it that way at all. A well-planned retirement often creates more room to be present for your spouse, your family, your health, and your own life. And that has real value. Hidden cost number 5, staying because your identity is tied to the job. Now, sometimes people say they are going to keep working for the money, but deep down they're staying because they don't know who they'll be without the job. Work gives you structure, a title, people who need you, problems to solve, a place to go, proof that you still matter. Then you retire and the machine keeps running without you. That can be humbling. Apparently, the company can survive without you. Here's what I've learned. Retirement isn't about becoming irrelevant. It's about redefining what useful looks like. That shift doesn't happen automatically. If your identity has been built around work, you need to start thinking about the next version of you before you retire, ideally, and know that it's going to be a transition. Know that you are more than your job, much more. Envision who you'll be outside of work and what that might look like. What do you want your days to feel like? Who do you want to spend time with? What would make you feel useful or healthier or more alive? For me, that's look like building my YouTube channel and this podcast, gardening, learning new things, getting more serious about playing the piano, and having more control over my own time. Now, none of these are dramatic or earth-shattering, but they have given me a new identity from what I was before. I'm no longer Mike, the healthcare IT analyst, but Mike, the early retiree that's enjoying his early retirement and all the new things he's doing. And honestly, I'm still figuring it all out, which is completely normal. Retirement isn't just some switch you flip, it's something you grow into. Hidden cost number 6 is the relationship cost of one partner staying behind. This one doesn't get talked about enough, but for a lot of people, especially Gen X couples, it's very real. If your spouse is already retired or is ready to, every additional year you keep working creates an asymmetry that quietly puts pressure on the relationship. One of you is living the next chapter. The other is still stuck in the old one. Your spouse is building new routines, new rhythms, a new sense of what the days look like, and doing it all without you. Meanwhile, you're coming home depleted, still mentally at the office, still operating on the work calendar. The gap between where you each are can be harder to bridge than people expect. And it runs the other way too. If you're the one who's retired, you may find yourself in a kind of limbo while you're waiting for your spouse to retire. Either way, retirement is something most couples imagined doing together. So when one is and the other hasn't, the one who has retired probably isn't enjoying it as much as they could because they can't spend as much time together yet. Anyway, I wanted to bring up this relationship dimension because it's not really talked about that often, but is a real relationship cost you're paying every year the gap stays open. Because time together, healthy, unhurried, unscheduled time is, of course, one of the things you've been building toward for years. And like the other costs on this list, once it's spent, you don't get it back. Now let's make this really practical. There are 3 questions I think you should ask before working one more year. Question 1, what exactly am I buying with another year of work? Be specific. More money isn't an answer. More money is endless. For example, are you staying employed for the health insurance until Medicare kicks in? Debt freedom, a bigger cash cushion, time for your spouse to retire, a pension milestone, a paid off house? Those can all be good reasons, but name them. Question 2, what am I giving up for another year of work? This is the question most people skip. Another year is not free. You pay with time, energy, flexibility, attention, and possibly your health. You may pay with years you can't buy back. That doesn't mean the trade-off is wrong, but you should see it clearly. Question 3, what would need to be true for me to feel ready? This is what separates planning from procrastination. If you can define what ready looks like, you can work toward it. If you can't define it, you'll probably keep moving the finish line. And if your answer is, I'll know when I feel ready, be really careful because fear is very convincing. So here's where I landed after retiring at 55. I'm glad I didn't wait for perfect certainty because perfect certainty isn't possible. No one has a crystal ball. I'm glad I know my numbers, a real plan for healthcare spending, taxes, a solid cash runway, and a plan for market risk. But I am also equally glad I didn't let the numbers become an excuse to ignore my actual life. Retirement planning isn't just about maximizing the account balance. It's about using the balance to support the life you actually want. And at some point, the risk flips. It's no longer just the risk of running out of money, it's the risk of running out of healthy time, of being forced out before you planned, of staying in a job out of fear, only to find the window for the life you wanted has quietly gotten smaller. So no, don't retire if you truly can't afford it. But if you're over 55, stop assuming that working longer is automatically the responsible choice. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. The only way to know is to measure both sides of the trade-off. Can you afford to retire? And if you can you afford to keep waiting? Both questions matter. Most people only ask the first one. Before we go, a quick note. I recently simplified my Patreon to make it more useful and accessible. All of my roadmap tools, checklists, worksheets, downloads, and resources are now free to members who join for free. That includes things like my ACA Magi Estimator, Retirement Readiness Scorecard, Cash Runway Worksheet, 10 Ways to Lower Your ACA Premiums ebook, Treasury Bill and CD Ladder Guides, Quarterly Retirement Review Worksheet, and more. I made those resources free because I want to help as many people as possible. And if you'd like to go a step further, the paid Roadmap member tier is now just $5 a month. That gets you early access to new podcast episodes, all of my podcast episodes ad-free, and access to the private Roadmap member community discussion space where paid members can ask questions, share experiences, compare notes, and communicate with others who are thinking seriously about retirement. I'll participate regularly, but my goal is to build a real community, not just make it about me. You can join for free or become a Roadmap member by using the link in the description. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, make the most of today.